Well, the vaccine rollout in the US is hitting its first snags. Holdups in deliveries, some temperature issues, and an allergic reaction are highlighting just some of the challenges that lie ahead in the historic large scale vaccination. Bloomberg Health reporter Angelica Levito joins me now with more details. Angelica, it's good to see you today. I want to start with the topic that's drawing the most alarm, I think, for people around the country, these allergic reactions. We saw some last week in the UK. And we just saw the first major one here in the United States in Alaska. I know there's a lot of speculation and fear around them, but what's actually happening?
So we have, like you said, we've seen our first case of a serious allergic reaction here in the US. It was a healthcare worker in Alaska, and this healthcare worker had to be hospitalized overnight, received Benadryl and some other medications, and last we heard was in stable condition. So, of course, that's causing some alarm. However, it is really important to remember that thousands of doses have already been administered across the US. And so far, we only know of one example. So it's definitely something that we need to keep in mind. And it's coming up already today at the FDA advisory meeting for Moderna's vaccine. And so we will hear more about that, but it's one case, something we need to keep an eye on though.
Yeah, I'm glad you are emphasizing that it's one case because at the end of the day, this is a numbers game. Every vaccine has some sort of risk, but well, I shouldn't say every vaccine, but every time you do have some sort of medical intervention, there is some sort of risk. And the idea here is that the benefits certainly outweigh the risks. So take us through the thinking in the medical community behind this.
Right. And of course, that's a big question is will people want to take this vaccine and how do we get them comfortable? So far, you are seeing healthcare workers all over the country sharing pictures, talking about their excitement as they get the vaccine. And so I think, as some people have described it to me, this is good old fashioned science. We're seeing the data today again being discussed at the FDA Advisory Committee about these two mRNA vaccines showing really, really strong efficacy in preventing serious illness and disease. So I think we need to remember that we can't lose sight of that.
Should the slim possibility of an allergic reaction stop anyone from getting the vaccine? I think what's notable about this case in Alaska was that this healthcare worker had no previous history of serious allergic reactions, right?
Right, and I think that that is something that the FDA will need to decide. Already, we saw last weekend the CDC's advisory committee talking about the need to monitor people who have had a serious allergic reaction in the past. Typically, you're supposed to watch anyone who gets a vaccine, for about 15 minutes, but they're recommending that maybe if you've had a history of these reactions, hang out a little bit longer, maybe 30 minutes. But ultimately, it's up to the FDA to review all the data, watch what we're seeing in real time, and then make recommendations from there.
So in this article that you have about vaccine rollout snags that you wrote with our colleague John Tozzi, you talk about something that happened to the Pfizer vaccine. We know that they need to be stored at a very cold temperature, the equivalent to negative 94 degrees Fahrenheit. And Pfizer has GPS monitoring and tracking built into these shipments to monitor the temperature. But something happened in recent days. It was stored at a temperature that was too cold, right?
Right. So yesterday we had a briefing with Operation Warp Speed officials, not just Bloomberg, but all reporters. And it came up that there were actually 4 shipments that needed to be quarantined because they were too cold. So the vials were identified as being too cold, and we don't know what that means. They might be okay, but the federal officials said that they didn't want to take any chances, and so they didn't even take these vials off the truck. They went straight back to Pfizer,
Hmm.
where they will be studied to identify whether the formula can get this cold and what the next steps are should this happen again. But then Operation Warp Speed went ahead and sent replacements. And this was two facilities in California and then one facility in Alabama, and totaling about almost 4,000 doses.
Okay. And look, I mean, all of this is happening in real time. We're watching the science play out in real time and this idea of this sort of unprecedented rollout of a vaccine, and we're watching what happens in a large scale like this. We learned something else yesterday about Pfizer dosage and how there were actually more doses in one vial. What happened there, and does this mean that more people will be able to get vaccinated?
Right. So some pharmacists were actually finding that they had more doses in the vials than the 5 that they're supposed to have. So sometimes 6, maybe even 7. And the FDA put out a statement saying that at this point in time, given that we are in a pandemic, that those pharmacists or doctors, whoever's giving the vaccine, can actually go ahead and use the remaining liquid in the vial as long as it's enough to give the full amount for one dose. But they're really clear that you should not be mixing vials. If there's a little bit left in one and a little bit left in another,
Mm.
you're not supposed to put those together. But what this means for our supply going forward, it could expand the supply, but I think it's worth noting that we don't know. Maybe this will constrain supply later on. Maybe you can fill less vials. We don't have any reporting to suggest that it will expand the supply or that it will cause problems later on, but it's something that we're really keeping an eye on.
Okay, well, send any extra doses of the vaccine to me. I will gladly take them. Bloomberg's Angelica Levito, thank you as always for your time. It's good to see you this afternoon.
The biggest stories the moment they happen from around the globe. Subscribe to Bloomberg Quick Take now for insight in an instant.